タープラチナ
Yeah, we've still got a lot of work to do. Anyways, I'm making a game! As some of you may have noticed over the last about year and a half, I've been extremely cryptic, constantly talking about the project I'm working on, and then not really going into it any further than that. That said, well, here it is. My brother and I have been hard at work for the better part of the last year and a half putting together a Roblox game. And really what it came down to is people kept telling me over and over that if I complained so much, why didn't I just do it myself? And so I took that to heart, and here we are. As of now, the first open technical test will be open on September 10th from 10 a.m. EST to September 11th at 10 a.m. EST. For those watching this on the day it comes out, that's 2 days from now on Wednesday. The goal of the session is to stress test the overarching systems in the game, as well as find what I'm sure will be a boatload of bugs that we'll need to fix. The idea of only opening the servers for 24 hours is to narrow down and isolate feedback so we can look through every single report. Speaking of reports, the official Discord for the game is open right now. In there, you'll be able to find the channels for bug reporting that will open and close depending on when the game is active, along with other info and progress updates. Participating in the first technical test of the game will net you the exclusive Star Platinum placeholder skin when the game releases. Going forwards, the current roadmap is to have the first chapter of our story-guided experience, along with the official release of the game, out by late next spring. That segues us into the fact that in order to meet that goal, I'm also looking for contractors for models and map building, so I'm sure you've noticed right now that we've got a big old nice Battlegrounds base plate, and the only stand model in the game that isn't a blank dummy is yoinked from the Roblox toolbox and almost assuredly stolen. While my brother and I are capable of a lot, this stuff is outside of our wheelhouse, so if you've got experience in the field, please reach out to me in my Discord DMs to get more details. My DMs are always open. Anyways, let's talk about the game itself, now that we've got all that out of the way. Our working title right now is JoJo Flames of Conflict, and while the main crux of the game is going to be based around the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure franchise, we will not be limiting ourselves to content strictly derived from there. The main goal I had when creating this game was to make something that I would want to play, a game by a player for the players, if you will. I almost got the feeling that most, if not all, of the people who were making games in the space didn't actually play their games, or if they did, they were so detached from the way that people actually played the games that they just sort of took their best guess when developing what they thought would be fun, and that's something that I really wanted to do differently. And because I've been in this space for so long and have analyzed what people like and don't like, I'm choosing to believe that the pillars of gameplay that we're building here will appeal to as many people as possible. That said, let's talk about all the aspects of Flames of Conflict you can expect, starting with the core combat. I won't lie to you and say that core combat isn't a borderline ripoff of my inspiration into this genre, YBA. That said, there are a lot of features in Flames of Conflict that set the game apart and don't just make it a total ripoff, and the most important of those features is deflection. Some OG fans of the channel may know this mechanic, as it was introduced after I fought tooth and nail in order to get it added into TCA before I decided to take a back seat with that game. But with Flames of Conflict, we're going all out with the deflections. For those who don't know what deflection is, it's basically a parry but without the stunning effect. This means that in order to avoid being hit by certain moves, you'll have to time your block accordingly, but timing said block properly is not a death sentence for the user of the attack. Now granted, parryable and blockable moves still absolutely exist in the game, adding far more depth to what's been available in these types of games in the past. The main goal here, of course, being to encourage aggressive play along with rewarding precision blocking without devolving into a more rigid playstyle where it feels like several moves in your toolkit are simply unusable against some opponents, since if you get parried, the follow-up that they do after they parry you is going to do a ton of damage. If I tried to give you a decent example of how this ends up playing out in practice, it's very reminiscent of a Sekiro-like combat system, but lacking the posture bar, meaning that blocking attacks that are only blockable doesn't punish you. Speaking of damage, let's talk about the time to kill. While combat damage right now is entirely customizable and modular in terms of the coding aspect, Flames of Conflict will be taking a potentially controversial approach to damage output in combat. I hope it isn't, and I hope a lot of people like it, but hey, you never know. Anyways, my overall goal was to make fights and engagements between players specifically end much faster than they would in the majority of other games in our niche. That means higher damaging moves, chip damage through blocks, and most importantly, lower overall cooldowns. The logic behind these decisions was something that took a lot of thought, so I'll lay out the reasoning the best I can. The most impactful thing here for me was cooldowns. I wanted people to feel like while they were fighting, they could always be pushing their different buttons to potentially just do cool shit. The problem, of course, being that how could we possibly balance a game where someone's ultimate ability had a 20-second cooldown, and most of the moves in the game were sub 15 or 10-second cooldowns? And of course, the answer I came up with was just an overall quicker fight pacing, allowing these moves to still be very impactful if used correctly, but not allowing people to spam them out, considering that they or their opponent would be dead before the cooldown ran more than once or twice. The decision making on this didn't just come from cooldowns though, it also came from a more generalistic perspective on combat and the varying levels of skill between players. The reality of the day is that at its core, Flames of Conflict is a fighting game. And fighting games, in most cases, a better player will just demolish a slightly worse player every day of the week. This is still mostly true in Flames of Conflict, but one of the goals of the faster time to kill was to allow lower skilled players to potentially luck or cheese their way into wins that they otherwise might not get, and lower the overall mid-level play ceiling by a lot. Because the thing about Roblox is that most of its players are not min-maxing frame data researching sweats. And so while the game will let those people flourish if they choose to do so, our predominant mission statement is to cater to and make the game as much fun for the majority as possible. And I thought making the overall win rate fluctuate a lot more in mid-level play was a good way of doing that. Speaking of fun, let's talk a bit more about balance and how fun factors into that. To put it simply, we're taking a fun first, balance second approach to balancing this game, especially when it comes to adding unique or otherwise out there moves and attacks that can spice up and radically change the way the sandbox is interacted with. One of the hurdles that I faced when first starting with the moveset creation was constantly second guessing myself and asking questions like, how could people end up abusing this? Which, in turn, I realized quickly put us sort of into this small box in terms of creativity. I came to the conclusion that if I constantly had ideas, but then had to tell myself I couldn't use them because people would use things to break the game, I'd end up with a boring, cookie-cutter experience with all the same tired stuff you've seen before. And once I made that distinction, moveset variety has sort of gone wild. The hand is definitely one of my favorite examples, having the ability to create a build that can flat out fly around the map, or having a different ability that can be charged up and when fully charged can flat out one-shot opponents. None of these on face value are even remotely balanced, but at the end of the day, these are fun things that people can mess with, and that was the goal when creating them. It's slightly outrageous stuff like this that I want to be the norm with the game. That said, balance isn't something that's going to be completely ignored, and inevitably things will be discovered that are far past acceptable and may have to be toned down. And what it comes down to is one of the main reasons that we can't realistically catch all of these potential issues is due to our next topic, build creation. Customization is really the name of the game for Flames of Conflict. One of the big criticisms of other Roblox fighting games in our niche that I've always had is that if you don't like the playstyle of your favorite stand or ability, you're just sort of out of luck. And to put it simply, we aim to change that. Say hello to the world of branching skill trees, allowing for nearly limitless creativity when putting together your playstyle. By default, every move in your arsenal generally has 3 different variations that change the way you'll play. With a default stand or ability, you'll be able to pick one out of the 3 choices available, with the other 2 being locked when you select one. But your choice of upgrades doesn't just end there, as you'll be able to manually upgrade each of your chosen abilities up to level 5, with the 5th upgrade being more expensive, but radically changing the effects or attributes of your move. Whether it be removing an in-move slowdown, making an otherwise cancelable move uncancelable, or outright changing the move as a whole. This is just one more factor that lets you personalize your build to how you want to play. But it doesn't stop there. When you reach the maximum level with your ability, that's when you'll be given the opportunity to ascend. Ascension awards you with a mastery point that can be used when you run out of skill points, along with breaking the shackles of the 1 move per category limit. Now instead, you have a move budget that you can use to unlock whatever you want without restriction. Want 3 different The Hand pulls? Go for it. 3 ground slams on Star Platinum? Why the hell not? The Ascension Mastery system is something that really opens the floodgates in terms of player freedom, and I absolutely cannot wait to see what people do with it. I've already got plenty of favorite builds myself, and I'm sure once people get their hands on it, I'm gonna see a lot of hilarious stuff. That said, one thing you may have also noticed by this point is the fact that since each stand ascends by itself, that means that all of your different aspects of leveling in terms of your character, ability, and weapons level separately, and have their own skill trees. So on that note, let's talk about weapons. Weapons are yet another pillar of gameplay that you can acquire, equip, and level up to give you an edge in combat. Unlike your main stands and abilities, weapons generally only have 2 moves available to them, with the variations of the main abilities being absent. They do retain the max level upgrade variations, however. The design decision here was mostly overall made to avoid the keyboard Jenga trap. I wanted to allow players to use all of their moves without having to constantly reach their fingers all the way across to like the K key. The other reason though stemmed from wanting to have a large list of weapons that could be obtained, encouraging players to try and find out and use different things rather than sticking with one choice. The player skill tree is also much the same in its current state. There are active upgrades tied to fully maxing out each of your player's attributes, which are HP, regen, dash cooldown, and block strength respectively, but I figured with all of the complications that are already there when it comes to stand and ability builds, keeping the weapon and player skill trees simple was for the best. I have shortly mentioned progression, but that begs the question, how do you progress? As mentioned on launch, we plan to have the first chapter of our story-based experience, but what does that entail? The short answer is a bigger focus on higher quality and more difficult PvE content. I've played so many of these games where it feels like you could fall asleep at the wheel and complete all of the PvE content, and it just shoves you straight into PvP, and that just doesn't seem right. In the build you'll be able to play this Wednesday, there will be several NPC bosses that can be fought with varying levels of difficulty that are based around your expected level when you get to those bosses in the storyline. That said, I think it would be a huge waste to build these bosses into the game and only have them and their movesets interact with you at specific and coordinated moments in that story, only to become an afterthought towards the endgame. That's why the vast majority of PvE encounters will be handled outside of the main game and in instance-based dungeons. All of which will of course have multiple difficulty settings, which will not only change the damage numbers and health of the AI present, but also the types of enemies you'll encounter, and more importantly, the moves used and properties of those moves used by the bosses, with higher difficulties being intended to be handled by parties of players rather than solos, and of course handing out much larger rewards. I think at its core, a lot of these games are social games, and so encouraging people to make friends to take on content that they otherwise can't do by themselves is a good decision, while also making sure that all of the content in the game is still obtainable by solo players if you so choose, even if it's potentially going to take a longer amount of time. Certain items and trinkets will only be able to be obtained via fighting things you may have already fought, increasing replayability and ideally avoiding the pitfall of several people huddled around one NPC trying to farm whatever gives you the most XP. PvE will not go out of style moving into the endgame as well, considering the fact that because your stands, abilities, and weapons all level separately than your character, it means that if you want to get and use something new, you're going to have to interact with PvE in order to level it up. And the idea is to make sure that the PvE is engaging enough to make leveling it up not a boring slog and actually enjoyable and difficult to accomplish. Now, that said, open world PvE outside of the instance dungeons is something that we're still planning on doing, and it can let us talk about an admittedly very much up in the air part of the game, and that's the Outlands. The main game map will consist of 3 main safe zone towns that you'll be able to fight people without any real consequence, and will also contain the majority of the story-based NPCs that you'll need to talk to, etc. It'll of course have access to shops and vendors, trading, access to your stand storage, all that kind of stuff. Between those safe zones, though, is the Outlands. These more wilderness-like areas are more of a no-holds-barred free-for-all for resources. They can contain more difficult NPCs, potentially much rarer loot, but with a much higher risk. Dying in the Outlands will cause you to drop half of whatever stacks of items you may be carrying, and send you back to whichever town you visited last. Now, to be fair, some items, such as weapons, can't be dropped on death in order to prevent losses of items that may have been leveled for several hours. As to be clear, this game is not intended to be any sort of permadeath experience where you lose hours of progress for dying. That said, the risk is there, and how long you choose to wait before hoofing it back to town to store whatever you've gained can be the difference between a huge haul of rare items or a big ol' feeling of disappointment. In the initial testing of these systems, you were going to drop all of your items on death, but I thought that might be too punishing of a punishment, so it's been lowered to half of your stacks. Of course, you can choose to brave these areas and explore for resources and XP, but the option is always there of simply taking a fast travel between towns to avoid these altogether. Now, to be clear, right now, the existence of items dropping on death is something that isn't final in the decision-making process of the game, and there's a very non-zero chance that the risk of the Outlands changes in some way completely. But as of right now, it's programmed into the game for you to drop half your items on death, and is the running plan going forwards. Now really, there's so much more that I have to say about what we're building, but all of that will come in due time, and I don't want this video to be an hour long, so I'll be wrapping it up here. I'm really happy to finally be unveiling this project that's meant so much to me over the last year and a half, and I hope that you'll have as much fun messing around on the 10th as much as I've had putting everything together. It's been a long road with a ton of hours put in, so I'm hoping at least some of that work will pay off, because I can't lie to you, making this entire thing has been very scary. I've leveled a lot of harsh criticism to a ton of games in the past, and so just by making a game myself, I'm painting a giant target on my back to have so many people say, "See, I told you so," and I'm well aware of that. And the reality of the day is, if "see, I told you so" is the answer here, I'm going to buckle down and do my best to prove those people wrong by fixing all of the things that are reported by you guys. As always though, I have to say, thank you for watching and continuing to support my channel. I hope to see a lot of you out there on Wednesday having fun with the stuff that I've made. Anyways, with that, I'm done here. So have a wonderful day and night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time. So, I mean, I guess you could do this.
I need my health back. This is fun and interactive gameplay, isn't it?
Not really.
Oh, it's actually so fucking ridiculous.